This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Hey, it's Doberman Dan here. Got to tell you something. Today is something a little different than the normal routine. This episode is what those in TV would call a rerun. It's an interview with my friend Ken McCarthy, truly an internet marketing pioneer. One of the first guys, if not the first guy, to recognize the power of the internet as a marketing medium and to adapt his successful offline direct response techniques to online. And that led to him founding the System Seminar, which was the premier internet marketing seminar, the first person to ever teach that. So this is in the top 3 of my most popular podcasts of all times. So check it out.
Prepare yourself for the uncensored, nothing held back, no BS reality of how business and life really work. Doberman Dan is off the chain.
Hey, I'm excited about my guest today. I'm speaking with the uber famous Ken McCarthy. How's it going, Ken?
Good, thank you.
Hey, I really appreciate you doing this today. I know you're kind of busy, so I appreciate you working the show into your schedule.
My pleasure.
You and I have a mutual love of music. I want to talk about that a little bit more in a second, but here's how I'd like to introduce you, which I think is going to be appropriate. I think you're going to enjoy this intro. I've been working on this for a few weeks now. When rock and roll hit back in the 60s and everybody went crazy for it, the people who were students of music or who were historians of music or just really music aficionados recognized these dudes aren't doing anything new. They've just taken what the old blues musicians from the South, the Delta blues musicians and the Chicago blues musicians, and maybe it's more up-tempo, but it's the same basic thing. They put a little bit of a twist on it. And then several years ago when Stevie Ray Vaughan was really hot, because I play guitar and I follow all these guys, everybody was copping Stevie Ray Vaughan's style, stealing his licks, trying to do his thing, without really understanding the history of what he was doing. They had no knowledge whatsoever of the great blues musicians in history. And I'm finding the same thing today in internet marketing. So if we really want to go back, those of us who are students of direct marketing, if we really want to go back to the innovators, then everybody knows that you are one of the main innovators. Everybody who's trying to rip off and model the guru du jour has no idea that everybody who's anybody in internet marketing who's a guru or consultant basically was either launched by you or just totally ripped you off and swiped you to start their deal.
Okay. You said it.
It gets a little frustrating to me because I like to study the history of this stuff, and I like to go back to the source. That's why I'm on the phone with you today. You have broken more barriers, created more breakthroughs in internet marketing, have provided more clarity, have provided more valuable information than anybody in the internet marketing community. So it's an honor to be speaking with you.
Well, thanks. And if there's a frustration, it's that people that are trying to learn this very often, unfortunately more often than not, get led astray and have their time and money wasted by people who don't necessarily know what they're talking about, which is not much I can do about that. I mean, people have to make their own judgments and do their own homework, but yes, it's one of the frustrating things is just to see people who could very well do well waste months, years, and maybe even get knocked out of the game because of legions of half-baked advice. But I'm glad you're doing this call because maybe some people get pointed in the right direction.
I believe so. I've got all your products, but the one that's nearest and dearest to my heart is the System Club Letters book. I don't know how many times I've read through that. I recently reread it about 60 days ago, and it's getting to the point where I'm just going to have to order another copy because there are so many highlighted sections in different colors. There's notes in the margins. There's circled stuff. It's like almost out of control. There's so much stuff in there. That has inspired more blog posts, more newsletters, more emails, and even entire business ideas than other courses that I've spent like 100 times the money on. That's got to be the best deal in internet marketing today for anybody who wants to learn how to do it right.
Yeah, I think we're selling it for $20, so it's a pretty good deal, and it's highlights, 57 highlights of stuff that I've shared with my System Club members over the years. So it's sort of the distillation of some of the very best things that we've done over the years in one book. I'm pretty sure it's $20, $120, if not 29, but it's no more than that. I've gotten great response to it. I'm really happy, and I have to thank my assistant Bettina Mueller because she compiled it. She put together she went through all the stuff that I'd done and said, you should put this in a book. And I said, okay, you put it in a book, and I'll look at it. And we went back and forth a little bit, taking some things out, putting some different things in, figuring out how to order it, what sequences to put the things in, what chapters to do, what sections to do. But I have to really thank her for doing that, for making that happen, because making books is a lot of work.
Oh yeah, kudos to Bettina. The continuity and the flow and everything was really good. It's not that easy to take content and compile it in a way that flows like that. You can't just throw it together. So kudos to her. Relay my gratitude to her for that book also.
I will. She's been my secret weapon for many years.
Hey, I know you don't have a lot of time today, but would you mind, I'm always interested in finding out about how people found direct marketing, because it seems like a lot of people are like me. They stumbled into it and didn't, it's not like they graduated from high school or college and decided, well, I'm going to go into direct marketing. So how did you find your way into this crazy business that we do?
Yeah, that seems to be the way that everybody gets into it. It's not one of those things they talk about in school, and you certainly don't see it on television, and no direct marketer has ever been glamorized by Hollywood. It's one of these strange corners of the world that you have to stumble on. You have to know somebody that's in it or run across it. Long story short, my first business ventures had to do with the music industry, specifically promoting concerts. And that's not really direct marketing per se. However, it is a very rigorous form of marketing. And like direct marketing, it's a kind of marketing where you can't pretend. I mean, there's a lot of make-believe and delusional thinking in a lot of marketing and a lot of business. But when the clock strikes 8 and the band begins, either the auditorium is full or it's not. And you can't pretend that it's a marketing triumph if there's empty seats. So that discipline is a very good one. And it's where I started, which is that you've got to make it work at all costs, no excuses. And there's a certain degree of direct. It's certainly not. There's no store. There's not like there's a concert ticket store that people shop in, and you basically use promotion, the media, and posters to get people, to drive people to buy the tickets. And so it's it's primitive direct marketing. And then when I was at college, I had a job teaching speed reading and study skills to college students, and I was like an itinerant teacher. Every month I'd be at a different campus. And after about a year of doing it, I made so many improvements to the course, and the owners were frankly dick, but I decided I was going to do it myself. And I started a business in New York City, and basically with flyers, big headline, promises, pull-offs, phone number, pre-internet, of course, people would call, and I'd do inbound telemarketing and talk to them about what they were trying to accomplish and answer the questions. Then I would send them literature, basically a sales letter, which would get me their physical mailing address pre-email, and I'd send them the sales letter. I didn't even know it was a sales letter. I was just trying to make it as interesting and as accurate and as useful and as compelling as possible and as comprehensive as possible. And then, of course, that built me a database, and every time I did classes monthly. I'd start a new class every month. And so I had a database, and so every month I would print out the labels on my little image writer printer and my Mac 128K, and I'd send the mailing out every month. And again, it was a count the heads kind of business. The class would start, and I could look out and see how successful I was or wasn't. And I didn't know I was doing direct marketing. That was a lot closer to classic direct marketing, lead generation, sales letter, follow-up, database marketing. And then I found myself in San Francisco, where by coincidence I happen to be right now. I live in New York, but I'm out here visiting. And I was on. In fact, I was just telling this story to somebody yesterday. There's a district in San Francisco called the Richmond District, and there is a street called Clement, and it's got a lot of Asian restaurants, like any variety of Asian food you could imagine: Cambodian, Thai, of course, Vietnamese, Burmese, which is where I had lunch yesterday. Anyway, there was a bookstore called Albatross 2, which no longer exists. And they had a cutout bin of used, battered books that were cheaper. And there was a book called Mail Order Know-How. And shame on me for forgetting the author's name. He was a great guy. I can almost visualize it. But anyway, it's a book that's out of print. If you can get a copy of it, grab it. And this guy was a second or third generation mail order guy. His dad certainly was a mail order guy, and I think maybe even his grandfather was a mail order guy. And he worked in the business. It was a sporting goods catalog, and then he did other projects too. And he was also a writer and a compiler of direct marketing lore. And I was very broke at the time, so broke that the $10 price on the book really gave me serious pause. I think I stood over that book for about a half hour, flipping through it and wondering if justify spending the $10. And finally I just said, this is so fascinating, and it resonates so much with things that I've done in the past. I'm going to read it. So I brought it home. It was a fantastic book, and it became the springboard for basically a year's worth of reading. The book was divided into lots of small 1, 2, 3-page sections, each highlighting a different company or a different personality, Dick Benson or Eugene Schwartz, people like that, people of that ilk. And so I would use the book as a springboard. So if they mentioned Dick Benson, well, I went out and got Dick Benson's The Secret of Secrets, Direct Mail Secrets, I think is the name of the book. And I just spent an entire year reading every book that was then available, and there were already quite a few available at that time on direct marketing. And that's not all I did, but I mean, it was a year, and it was stacks and stacks and stacks of books. I was just fascinated. And then I started looking for, okay, how do I apply this knowledge? And it's kind of a longer story, but I started a company that produced and promoted seminars and workshops on marketing for people in the real estate finance industry. Because I detected a gap there, and I had a few ins in that industry, and I just started putting on conferences, and I would hire speakers or enroll speakers, and we'd run lead generation ads, and we'd follow up with the people that inquired, and we would, I'd write these very elaborate sales letters, seemingly elaborate, 8-page sales letters. This is again pre-internet. Mm-hmm. And by golly, we filled those seats and we made money, and it was a great thing. And then in my neighborhood there was a guy who was kind of a cutting edge person in what was then called multimedia, which was pre-CD-ROM. Now everybody takes CD-ROM. I don't even know if people use CD-ROMs anymore, but CD-ROMs used to be a cool, interactive. You'd slip them into your computer and interact with them, and it was, groovy, pre-internet. And I was fascinated by it, and I volunteered to write some ad copy for his traveling conference. And it was the best copy he ever had, and he wasn't even able to change it for 4 years, not change a word. It pulled so well. And and through that, I because he was such a central figure, I got connected to everybody in that world, that multimedia world. And then I stumbled on the internet in '93, roughly around the time the web already existed, but roughly around the time that the Netscape browser, the Mosaic browser was developed. I think it was launched in January, and I first saw it in July. So it was like 7 months later, and I was just amazed because I had been doing, pretty significant mailings. I had $20,000 postage bills some months, and I was kind of the concept that I could hit a button and mail to that many people and it would basically cost me nothing was really intriguing. And I thought, gee, if even just 10% of my prospect base were to become internet users, this would save me, significant money. I really didn't have any concept of how big it would be because I was sort of a conference, seminar, workshop, gathering type of event kind of guy. I organized a conference that brought multimedia producers together with specifically Mark Andreessen, who's the co-founder of Netscape and is now one of the most significant venture capitalists in all of Silicon Valley. But back then he was just 23. And him and a bunch of other internet guys, and it was sort of the first meeting ever of those two industries. They just didn't really connect at all. And then my purpose in putting them together was to bring them together, but also to teach them direct marketing because neither side knew anything about direct marketing. In fact, in those days, the model for internet was, I don't even know what the hell their model was. They were just excited to be able to put up web pages, and I was like, great, how are you going to make money? And one of my students, Rick Boyce, became the guy who was the spear point for selling banner ads. He was the first guy to do it in any meaningful way that really made the cash register ring. And he learned the whole idea of clickable ads and calculating click-through rate and the fact you could run a small ad and take people to a huge website. He learned all that from us. So, yeah, a lot of the things that we brought to the table ended up becoming really important in the models that made the internet profitable. So, yeah, that's basically how I got into the game, step by step.
That's interesting. I find it extremely interesting that you were actually doing just about everything right with the model you were following before you even knew what direct marketing was. You just kind of figured it out yourself. Did you have I'm sorry, go ahead.
Necessity. I didn't have any margin for error. If I didn't succeed, I wouldn't be able to eat. I wouldn't be able to pay my rent. So I had to think everything through very carefully, which is, okay, it's better to have a inexpensive poster than a fancy poster because I can put up, for the same amount of money, I can put up 10 times as many posters. That's got to help my bottom line. That's a big issue that Claude Hopkins dealt with in either scientific advertising or my life in advertising. The fact that he says that the 1 penny letter outpulls the 2 penny letter. Well, I discovered that, just from experience. And then, you're thinking, okay, I've got these posters up. They better be legible. Like, they better stop people in their tracks and be readable and compelling. So that made me think about headlines. And then I realized once they stop, I better have some really strong telegraphic style bullet points that lead them to pull the response coupon. And that response coupon better be a little mini ad by itself because you could easily, if you think it through, you can visualize that, they're going to, 2 days later, they're going to be fishing this thing out of their pocket. And if there isn't a good summary of the offer on the pull-off coupon, they're not going to even know what the heck it is. And then I knew how infrequently the phone rang. So when the phone rang, I knew what it cost me in terms of blood, sweat, tears, and money to get the phone to ring. So I certainly didn't screw around when somebody called. I got on and gave them all the time they needed. And then I knew the value of those leads. And I just seemed logical that people aren't going to necessarily buy just because, they talked to me one time. So it's only, I don't know what postage was then. It wasn't too bad. Why not mail to them? So it's, a lot of direct marketing is just common sense.
That's true. But it's also surprising how few people have any common sense.
Well, their minds are, it's going back to what we said at the beginning. There's so many advice givers, and so much of the advice is just utter baloney. And everybody wants to be glamorous, and everybody wants to be cooler than cool, but that's not what sells products or services. Clarity sells products and services. Generating as many impressions as you possibly can sells products and services. Having a clear and compelling offer and a good deal, sells products and services. Follow-up sells products and services. And none of those things are terribly sexy. They're not. They really can't be dramatized. So the guy that comes along with some bunch of puffery and inflated language and miracle tools will get more attention from beginners, and then they go down the wrong path, and they wonder why nothing works. But that's c'est la vie.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, that you enunciated something that's been incredibly frustrating to me. Well, you're the guy that I learned this from. You're the first person to say, hey, the internet, yes, it's definitely way cool, but it's a media. So everything that we do as direct marketers that we apply in other media, we just apply to the internet. And then somehow along the way, that all got twisted around. Like I even say it too. I mean, we talk about internet marketing and stuff like that, but it's all direct marketing. I've had guys with significantly sized online businesses call me and say, hey, you know what? I'm thinking about trying my hand at direct marketing. And I've heard it so many times I'm sick of it. Like, I'm like, dude, what do you think you're doing now? You are using direct marketing.
Yeah.
But you were the first guy to give me clarity about that, because I allowed I had a mail order business in the bodybuilding niche, and I allowed this guy to talk me into setting up a website in '96. I thought it was going to be a waste of time. I just didn't understand I had no idea where it was going. I didn't understand the media. And it wasn't, I mean, it was years later. I was chasing after bright, shiny objects, and I was listening to the wrong people and getting pulled in this direction, that direction. It wasn't till I found you that I finally found clarity on the issue. And it was so obvious when you said the internet is just a media. Everything we do as direct marketers, we just apply to the internet. Then I felt like a dummy.
No, it's tricky. It's tricky. It's very hard to see the potentials and qualities in new mediums. It takes time. It just takes time. I just started early, and I certainly went down a lot of blind alleys myself. But it just kept coming back to, this is instead of a piece of paper, this is a computer screen, and instead of having them call, they can opt in. And instead of sending them mailings, we can have a sequential autoresponder, which I was involved. Unfortunately, it never came to fruition, but we were developing an AWeber-like sequential autoresponder service way back in 1997. And even guys who were pretty savvy about the direct marketing aspects of internet marketing were very skeptical about the value of something like that. They couldn't imagine that people would want to be emailed that much. And I said, well, you know what? If they're interested in the subject and the content you send them is good, you can email them forever. And I have a couple of businesses where I email people 2 or 3 times a day, and they work just fine. And I have, some other ones where I mail them, once a day. Well, I have one that's 2 or 3 times a day, and one that's twice a day. And the list just grows and grows. And we have dropout, of course, but they're healthy lists. So yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky, and especially when the noise is so loud. You open the newspaper or magazine, or you turn on the TV, and there's somebody being lionized for some wild and crazy thing they're doing, and you think that must be it.
Mm-hmm.
These simple things can't be it. It must be that other thing over there. Blocking and tackling. I'm not really. In fact, I'm not a football fan at all. But I love the phrase blocking and tackling because that's what wins football games. And it's not glamorous. It's not the 90-yard pass or the 70-yard run. It's the blocking and tackling on every play, and there's nothing glamorous about it, and there's nothing fancy about it, and it's what makes all the difference in the world in the game. And it's the same thing in marketing. So I got this. I have to give credit to this. This comes from Ben Horowitz, who's one of the principals. Actually, he's the Uber partner in Mark Andreessen's venture capital firm. In fact, his firm's called Andreessen Horowitz. And I don't know if this is original to Ben, but I first heard it from him, and it's just brilliant. He goes, everybody's looking for this silver bullet, when actually what they need to be doing is piling up and using lead bullets every day, day in and day out. And that's how businesses are built. Occasionally you could do a master stroke and something amazing happens, but it's usually by accident. What you really need to be focusing on is just the day in and day out execution of what boils down 99.9% of the time to very basic things.
I love the analogy of the bullet. Everybody looking for the silver bullet, but you do much better just using lead bullet day after day. That's great.
Yeah, and lots of them. Here's another one I want to share, and I got this from two sources. One is Martin Atkins, who's a punk rock drummer who became a producer, who's now an educator of people in the music industry, and then this also came from another partner at Mark Andreessen Horowitz, which is basically same different words, same theme. You become successful by doing more than any reasonable person would ever do. And that's just an absolutely essential part of the puzzle. No reasonable person would spend an entire year reading in excess of 100 books on direct marketing and mail order. That's just not a reasonable thing to do. It's reading one book is reasonable, or 3 books. In fact, I got some flack from someone very close to me who kept asking me, when are you going to be done with all this reading? And it wasn't a reasonable thing to organize this big conference, this web multimedia conference, when both of the industries were fledgling at best, and there was really no money in the conference. I finally made my money back on what it cost me to put on, because I videotaped it and sold the tapes later, but it was a loser. I mean, it cost me money. It wasn't an income-producing event. So it's not reasonable to take hard-earned, scarce money and organize a conference to try to move an industry forward that's fledgling, that you don't really even have a place in yet. That's not reasonable. And yet might have been dollar for dollar the best thing I ever did in my life, in terms of the return I got from that. So that's another, so forget the silver bullet, focus on lots of lead bullet, and if you're really serious about succeeding at something, you need to be prepared to just do unreasonable amounts of work and unreasonable things.
That's sage advice that also, unfortunately, for some people is very unpalatable advice, regardless of the fact that it's true. They would rather hear that there is a silver bullet or that it is easy. And there's plenty of people selling them products, promising them that. But based on your advice right then and there, sounds like we should be wary of anybody promising a silver bullet, or that you can be reasonable and be successful and that it is easy.
Yeah, the silver bullet business is a very healthy, lucrative business for the sellers, not so much so for the buyers. And it's easier, I guess, to write or hit your credit card, write a check or hit your credit card for $2,000 or whatever it is people are paying these days for things, than it is to actually do some work. That 4-letter word. And it's not just the work that's hard, it's working hard and not knowing, which unfortunately is part of the game. I did a lot of things in the early days, in the early 90s in San Francisco with internet issues, and 95% of them produced no fruit whatsoever. They were just, they could be perceived as a waste of time and energy, but you just don't know that until later. Yeah, it's just, another great analogy I love is the frog. There's 2 frogs, and they're both dropped into pitchers of milk, real milk, the old-fashioned real milk. And one of them, the good direct from the cow milk, yes. Yeah, right, and one of them just despairs and drowns, and the other doesn't know how the heck he's going to get out, but he's kicking his feet like crazy. And bit by bit, he churns the whole milk into butter and is able then to use that as a base to leap out. And that's really, I think that's the best analogy for how my business ultimately worked. I didn't necessarily know what I was doing. I just, churned like crazy until I got some solid ground and then was able to build off that. But that's kind of the nature of business, especially especially when you're dealing with something that's unformed, which the marketing side or the internet in itself was unformed. The commercial internet was totally unformed, and the idea of marketing on the internet and selling on the internet was completely unformed. So if you wanted to be in that, everyone goes, oh, wow, you were so lucky, to start so early. Well, I wasn't the only guy around back then, and a lot of people just gave up and dropped out. Because they couldn't.
Because I imagine you encountered a lot of resistance.
Tremendous. From Internet people of the day who, the big issue in 93 was, can the Internet be commercialized at all? And if it can be, should it be? That was the big issue in 93, as late as 1993.
Wow.
And the multimedia people, some of them were very progressive and open-minded and imaginative. It was a really great group of people, but not all of them were. And I remember when I was putting that conference on back in 94, the guy that had actually helped considerably start a trade association for multimedia producers. I had a meeting with him. He cut the meeting short in about 2 minutes and turned me over to his idiot assistant and said, explain it to her. And didn't support the conference at all. 2 years later, he was scrambling around trying to get into the Internet industry, but he saw absolutely no reason why somebody who was making multimedia titles should be interested in the World Wide Web. He not only didn't see the reason, he thought the whole conversation was an utter waste of time, and that I was an idiot for wasting his time even talking about it. And this is a guy who got my help to start his trade association. I wasn't like a stranger off the street that had no track record. I was a guy that was known as the copywriter for the industry. I was the guy that helped him get his leg up, and even with all that background, he utterly dismissed the potential of what I thought was worth at least testing. Is there a reason for multimedia people and Internet people to get together and compare notes? Because at that time, honestly, they didn't talk. The Internet people were all about computer networks, and the multimedia people were all about audio and video and interactive screens, which didn't really come along. It was primitive. It was available in a very primitive format through Mosaic. But the things that we take for granted now, there was nothing like that in 94. Nothing. It would take I don't know if you remember, but it would take, a minute for a page, for a photo to paint itself onto the screen. You just have to sit there and watch download, one line at a time. So the tremendous resistance. And, I've compared notes with Mark Andreessen 20 years later, and when he and Jim Clark were going around and pitching Netscape, because Netscape started in April of 94, and so that summer, they were, and even fall, they were pitching the idea of every company, New York Times, CBS, and Time Magazine, you should have a website. You should use the Netscape server software. And they, he said they were 99% of the meetings they had ended, were negative. Why would we do this? What is this? This seems like a waste of time, blah, blah, blah. So, I don't necessarily recommend to people to get into the cutting edge, the world of cutting edge things. It's kind of hard. But, to a degree, whatever you're going to do in business, even if you're going into an established industry, you need to be different. You need to bring something, relatively significantly different to the party. Otherwise, who needs you?
Good.
There's way too much Me Too business development and marketing. Hey, this guy's making money selling marbles this way, so the way to make money is sell marbles this way, so I'll do it too. Maybe, if you're selling marbles to a market that doesn't have access to marbles and you're the one that to deliver them, maybe that makes sense. But otherwise, it makes no sense at all. What you really need to be doing is figuring out, here's the market, people are spending money, what's missing from the market. That's something I have in the book, the System Club letters. Market research really isn't that hard. It's like walking along a road. First of all, you want to make sure there is a road. It's hard to be a pioneer, and it could have easily gone wrong for me. The internet could have not taken off, and I would have wasted a lot of time, money, and energy. But anyway, it's more practical. Is there a road at all? Or is there traffic on the road? Are there people on this road? Are there cars going back and forth? And then and if that's established, in other words, are Are there buyers? Is there a marketplace? Are buyers actively buying? And then the next question is, what's wrong with the road? Does it go everywhere it should go? Are there holes in the road? Are there bumps in the road? And that's the opportunity for new people to come in. One is building roads to different locations that haven't been served before. Another opportunity is to find holes in the road. Why isn't, I'm trying to think of an example, but here's a product, here's a service. Why doesn't it come with a guarantee? Why isn't it delivered monthly to your door? Why isn't it financed? Why doesn't it come with a free service contract for 6 months? There's all kinds of things missing from marketplaces that a new player can bring to a marketplace. And then there's bumps in the road. Why is it so hard to buy this thing? Why can you only buy it in super large sizes when most people want it in small sizes? Why doesn't anybody give you an opportunity to test it before you buy it? Those would be examples of bumps in the road, things that make the transaction more difficult. So, if someone said, well, how should I get into a marketplace? That's one thing I would look at is, make sure there is a road, make sure it's a traveled road, and then see what you can do to improve the road.
That's a huge tip, and I imagine a lot of people are going to find that very encouraging, because I hear feedback from people who say, geez, the internet has lowered the barrier to entry so much that it's very hard to find opportunity these days. I wanted to go into this niche, and there's 40 bazillion people on the internet selling in that niche. You just revealed a way to find those opportunities.
Yeah, you have to be thinking in terms of excellence too. I mean, too much internet stuff is people are making money selling ribbons to schoolgirls, and that's a great business. Let's all go into it, and let's all do it the same way that everybody else is doing it. And wow, it's not working for me. Well, what the hell did you expect? You're not bringing anything new. You're not bringing anything excellent. It's the same old crap. And you just want money to pour from the sky just because you're doing something. Well, it doesn't work that way. And, I have to say this, too. I've seen so many people over the years develop some way of gaming the market. Might be related to technology, or it might be related to some new kind of media or advertising that comes along. And they optimize their business to basically take advantage of a very narrow little set of circumstances that anybody who thinks of, devotes any time at all. In other words, they're not thinking about the quality of the product. They're not thinking about the quality of the relationship with the people they're selling to. They're thinking, pay-per-click's really cheap, when it was. Or banners are really cheap, and therefore I can, run this little money machine and do some little arbitrage and make a lot of money. And all those arbitrage scenarios always close, because people catch on and go, wow, pay-per-click is really cheap. I'm going to buy some. The next thing you know, it's bid up and it's not cheap anymore. And that's just one example, but there's dozens and dozens of examples of arbitrage situations that are more technical than really marketing and customer and market-driven, that people were, sometimes you can mint money for a couple of years, 10, 20. I know guys making $10, $20, $30,000, $40,000 a month on some little narrow technical window. And then when it closes, they're lost. They have no clue how to get back on the bus because they don't know a thing about marketing. And they complain about, well, it's all over and there's no opportunities on the internet. I mean, my God, anybody that thinks that is just not paying attention. I mean, we've got, not that it's easy to start an Airbnb or a Uber or Facebook or something like that, but these are all newish companies. These are not companies started 20 years ago or 15 years ago or even 10. I mean, I think Facebook just had its 10th anniversary. So clearly there's all kinds of opportunity, but it requires imagination, it requires a lot of work, it requires getting to a market really well. I want to tell this story because I think it's really important. I have some video of Mark Zuckerberg when he first came out to Palo Alto, and basically the Facebook, which is what it was called then, was entirely focused on colleges and universities, 100%. And in this video interview, not one that I did, but I happen to have the tape, he's just saying, we're just going to focus on this. We're going to focus on making this serving this market as well as we can possibly serve it. And this is sort of another principle, which is, saturate the niches that are closest to you. In other words, many people have products that could reach the world and everybody could benefit from and blah, 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 blah. But, in reality, there's one market that you can hit perfectly. And maybe it can grow beyond that original market the way Facebook did. But he didn't really have a plan, but he did everything correctly. He focused on making the absolute best Facebook program for his college. Then when that worked, he said, well, let's expand it to some local colleges. And when that worked, he said, let's do it for 100 colleges. And when that worked, he said, let's do it for all the colleges. And every step of the way making it as excellent as he possibly could make it. And therefore having a strong base on which to grow. And this is something else I think marketers really should think about. What is the closest market to you that you can just completely dominate, saturate, and serve excellently? Secure that market, and then think about growing, beyond that. I'm just having a counseling session, a consulting session with somebody who has something that's theoretically useful to everybody, but, that's a really bad theory. What's a better thing is the reality of, okay, what market, what segment of the world actually needs what you've got urgently right now? And let's focus on getting there and saturating that market and forget about how big this is and how much potential it has and how many gazillions of dollars it could make. All that's irrelevant. What's uber relevant is the actual people that you sell to and serve today. And that's a beginner's problem, and sometimes an advanced marketer's problem. Spending too much time spinning your wheels thinking about the big picture instead of taking care of the little picture. Again, it's the silver bullet versus lead bullets issue. Lead bullets are dull. They're not glamorous. Any one lead bullet is not very significant. The accumulation of lead bullets that makes the difference. And one silver bullet really doesn't take you very far. In fact, they don't make bullets out of silver because silver is a soft metal. They make it out of lead because lead's heavy.
And the lead bullets are a hell of a lot cheaper. You can shoot a whole lot more lead bullets than silver bullets. In what you were talking about, the counseling session you had, that the person had, their product was for everybody. Or anytime I hear that, I think, I sure hope you got deep pockets. Because when your product's for everybody, it's pretty much for nobody. I don't know how you're going to reach. How do you reach everybody?
You can't. And I always say, I use this a lot, more than 10 years ago now, but my saying is you can't invade Afghanistan in a pickup truck. If you've got to match what you're trying to accomplish to the resources you have. And none of us really have that many resources at the end of the day. And when you're starting out, you really don't have many resources. So rather than have these expansive ideas of, you're going to dominate the world, figure out what market that's close by, not necessarily geographically, but psychologically close by, that you can go in and just completely saturate and dominate with the resources you've got. And continuing the military analogy, okay, now you've got a piece of ground. It's just like war. War's not a theory. War is very practical. We need a piece of ground. We need to take a piece of ground so we can build a base and use that base to do excursions and grab more pieces of ground. And then when we've got those pieces of ground, now we, reach out further and grab more pieces of ground. And it's exactly the same thing in marketing. And so many people neglect that basic step, which is get your piece of ground that you can stand on and expand from there. Instead, they're trying to go off on all fronts, and a lot of it's talk, a lot of it's wasted energy, when they should be just talking to customers and talking to prospects. That's the other thing that just blows my mind is like people want to go into a marketplace, and I go, okay, how many prospects have you talked to? Oh, prospects? What? Why? What? I mean, are you serious? You're thinking of bringing something to market, and you haven't spent hours and hours and hours examining everything in your marketplace, examining all the products, examining all the existing advertising, examining all the existing business models, talking to distributors, talking to other marketers, talking to prospects, talking to customers. You're conceiving a business without doing those things. What are you doing? And if you do that stuff, it doesn't cost anything. I call it digital shoe leather. Either doing it online or you're doing it by telephone or maybe you're doing it face to face. But it doesn't cost you anything but your time and energy. And yet and yet the investment is so massive in terms of the payback. It's just massive. We're trying. We have to adapt ourselves to the market. This is a Gene Schwartzism. And if you read that great book, Breakthrough Advertising, in the very beginning chapter, it's one of the only chapters that's easy to understand. The rest of them are pretty close to rocket science. But the very first chapter, he says, as direct marketers, we are closer to being nuclear physicists or stock traders than anything else. And the nuclear physicist has to deal with reality as it is. He's trying to discover reality as it is. He can't invent reality. He's got to figure out what reality is and work around it. The stock trader has to see, is the market going up? Is the market going down? And I want to be in when it's going up. I better make sure if I'm wrong that I'm out before I lose my shirt, et cetera, et cetera. We're dealing with things not as we wish they could be or hope they could be or think they should be, but as they are. And the more you talk to people in the market, and it's a balancing act, because sometimes the market, like in my case, the market might be very negative. Oh, no, that internet, how can anybody make money on the internet? Why would a guy that does multimedia titles be interested in the internet? And yet there was a counter balance to that, which was just my knowledge of history and knowing, having been a direct mailer, knowing what it would mean if people ever did use the internet, and knowing what it meant economically if I could mail to somebody by email instead of by print, by postage, and knowing if instead of mailing an elaborate mailing marketing piece, I could put my marketing piece one time on the internet, and an theoretically infinite number of people could see it an infinite number of times, and it wouldn't really cost me more than the cost of putting the website up in the first place. So it's a balance. It's you can't. I'm not a fan, but the guy who I can't think of his name, but he started Fox News.
Rupert. What is it? Rupert Murdoch?
That's Rupert Murdoch hired this guy. I'll be right up front. I think both political parties are horrendous beyond belief. And it's really just a matter of which one is worse, and whichever one is in power at the time always strikes me as being the worst. But they're both terrible. Roger Ailes was the guy that Rupert Murdoch hired to develop Fox News. And I think Fox News is appalling beyond human comprehension, but it is a very successful enterprise. Anyway, Roger Ailes said this, and he's absolutely right. He goes, if I have to hire a focus group to tell me what to do with my channel, then I shouldn't be running the channel. So he's not saying I'm going to ignore reality and just go with what I feel like doing. What he's really saying is he has absorbed so much about the reality of things and what works and what doesn't work and so on and so forth, that he doesn't need to be, he won't be swayed and doesn't need the micro input of people. I don't know if this is making sense. It seems contradictory. On the one hand, I'm saying know everything you can possibly know. On the other hand, I'm saying at some point you have to ignore what everyone's saying and do what you know based on all the things that you've done in the past and all your research and all your experience. And it's a paradox. Life isn't simple, but that's it. So it cuts both ways. Number one, you need to do a tremendous amount of research and talk to a tremendous amount of people, but then you also have to have your own vision of things too, and not just be a slave to whatever the surveys tell you or people in the industry tell you. People in the industry may not know what really could work or what might work. You've got to know based on your thinking and your research and your talking with people and your study and all that. So I don't know I hope that's helpful. I don't know if it's helpful, but it's reality.
It makes perfect sense. It's it's like you said, it's a balance, and unfortunately, I've gone way off balance on the side of doing really cursory market research, but man, I'm charging for it because my gut tells me this is right. Well, like you said, we got to face reality, and sometimes people don't want to face reality because reality is painful. And I've charged forward with nothing but a good gut feeling, and could have saved a lot of money if I would have followed your advice of taking more of a balanced approach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would like to ask you 3 things I promise they will be quick because you're traveling and I know you have things to do. One is a total non sequitur. I gotta ask this, and I'm sorry to throw us off the topic, but let me make sure I got the story right. Basically, in a nutshell, the way I understand it is you are the one who brought Stanley Jordan to the world, the guitarist Stanley Jordan, who to this day I don't believe that cat is mortal. That he's not human. No human.
He first of all, he brought himself to the world, number one. I mean, there are people who I have made famous who I will take full credit for their careers because they were pretty much just about average, and by the way I packaged them, they seem spectacular. That especially happened in the internet marketing world a lot. In Stanley's case, I really can take no credit because he is what he is, and he made himself into what he is. However, the credit I will take is that for years, when nobody else was backing him or doing practical things to help him and help him put himself on the radar, because there's a difference between having the goods and being on the radar screen. And that was a very educational experience for me because when I heard him first play when he was 18 and I was 18, I'm like, this is insane. This guy is like, he can burn the paint off the walls. I mean, it's crazy. But everyone else is like, yeah, he's a good guitar player. I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is not a good guitar player. This is somebody from another planet when it comes to guitar. Not obvious. I mean, some of the original gigs that I got him were, coffee houses, and, he'd make $20 and people would be chatting up their girlfriends, their dates, instead of listening to him play, and I was just being head in hand.
Wow.
These people. But yeah, I put him in front of some of his biggest audiences before he became famous. I produced a summer concert series, and we put him in front of 1,000 people one night, and that was a big deal in those days for him. I also put on a kind of a high-end concert at the school that we went to, and he was him and there was 2 people on the bill, and it was a real theater setting, and we had hundreds of people in the audience, and they paid real money to hear him. And I wrote the liner notes for his first album. It was privately produced. It's not one of the ones that you can buy. I think you can find it. It's called Touch Sensitive, and it's buyable. But I'll tell you right now, there are only 1,000 press, so there are not a lot of them floating around. But I wrote the first liner notes. I did a lot to help his career, but ultimately it was Blue Note Records that finally woke up and said, my God, let's sign this guy up. And, they got him onto Johnny Carson, and Johnny Carson loved him. And I think Johnny Carson had him on. Now, if you're too young to appreciate this, I'll just say that there's nobody today on TV that maybe Oprah, I don't know. I don't even think Oprah could hold a candle. There's nobody on TV.
No,
today.
Not even Oprah.
Yeah, there's nobody on TV today that had the kind of power Johnny Carson had, because this was pre-cable TV. This is when there were, 7 channels, and there was one late-night show, and he was it. So if you got on Johnny Carson, you were made, and I think he was on Johnny Carson. Something like a ridiculous number of times, 17 times. It was just a lot. And in '87, he had the biggest selling jazz album in the world by a factor of 3 times. His competitor that year was Miles Davis. If anybody knows jazz, they know how ridiculous that is to beat Miles by 3-1. So I did a lot to help him. I was certainly prescient, and I'll take full credit for that in recognizing his talent and actually backing that recognition with action and sticking with it for years. But I didn't make him famous. He was going to be famous. Well, actually, you just don't know. So much of life is circumstance. Blue Note Records at the time, someone had just acquired Blue Note Records. Blue Note Records has an amazing catalog of just jazz classics, as I'm sure you know, and nothing new had been done with the label for years. And if you're going to make a back catalog valuable, you need new stuff to catch the public eye. And so they went out and they signed a bunch of young musicians, and one of them was Stanley. And so Stanley had the full power of a very esteemed record label pushing him And he certainly had the goods to deliver, and it was just a marriage made in heaven. So now, had that not happened, you can be this is a tragic and true fact of life. You can be very talented and very good and not necessarily be uber successful. Again, a lot of it has to do with understanding the market you're in and finding a way to get in, plug what you've got into that market as it exists. So anyway, so I certainly knew Stanley when he was not known. I certainly recognized him, and I certainly helped him a great deal in those early years, no doubt about that.
That's so cool. For anybody who's listening who is not, if you're not aware who Stanley Jordan is, just look him up on YouTube. And also consider the fact that when he really hit big, was that like mid-'80s, Ken, 86, 87?
It was 80, probably had 86, showing up on the TV, and then 87, his album came out, and I'll tell you, 85, he was still playing on the street and getting hassled by the cops. And then, I think 86 was sort of building the audience, and 87, the album came out, and it was just a mega, mega, mega hit, and he still lives off, he doesn't sit at home and do nothing and lives off that, but he lives off the profile. He still gets great gigs. I think he did, where was he playing the other night? I was in the city the same night he was playing. I was doing something else, but I think he was playing at Iridium. It's a really high-end club. It's a good gig for a jazz guy. And, here he is, 20, since 27, but it's 20 years later. No, excuse me, nearly 30 years later.
Yeah.
And he's still getting great gigs. And, of course, he's developed as an artist and developed alliances with other great artists. And he's got a good career. By the way, he wrote, when you turn on the Apple and you get that sound.
Uh-huh, yeah.
He wrote that.
Oh, my gosh. I didn't know that. I hope he got some kind of royalty deal on that. Like every time somebody turns on their computer, he gets a few cents.
I'm afraid he didn't get a royalty. I know, my God, if he got a fraction of a penny, that would have been a $1 zillion deal. No, I'm sure he got paid pretty well, but I think it was just a one-time gig. But that always cracks me up. It's really interesting because we were roommates in college for a year, and I always just think, and by the way, he's the guy that first showed me the internet in 79.
Wow.
We didn't call it the internet then, and I didn't realize. Well, it really wasn't much of an internet. It was only about 10 universities were on it. But one of the school that we went to was connected to Columbia University, and he was very into computer music. And software at those days was very rare and very expensive. And the only music software program of any worth was owned by Columbia University. And so what he would do is he'd write his code, and he would then send the code via the pipeline, this pipe, to Columbia, where it would be processed, and then the output would be sent back to our school via, this pipe. And I just thought of it as the network, or I didn't really know what it was, but it happened to be the internet. So it's just kind of historically interesting that we were using the internet way back then, not really even knowing what it was. It was just a useful thing.
Wow. That's back in wow.
Yeah, and then he
didn't even know what a computer was.
Well, this was all done on mainframes. There were no PCs, or at least we didn't have PCs when we were in college. I graduated in 81, and so that meant we started in 77. And the only guy I knew that was using a word processor was actually going to the E-Quad, the engineering quad, to use the mainframe to write his papers. And he was like an uber nerd of epic proportion. It was a different time. But I think it's just interesting that, to me at least, that we were roommates, and he ended up writing the orchestra hit that starts every Macintosh computer, and I ended up being the guy that really figured out that the web could be commercialized, and not only that it could be commercialized, but how it would be commercialized and how it could be commercialized. And a lot of the things that are common now, like banners and like treating email like direct mail, and like sequential autoresponders, and like pay-per-click, and like keyword research, and calculating click-through rates, and using audio, you hit a button and the audio starts right away, using video. I mean, I was like the first guy to do a lot of that stuff, or one of the very, very first guys to do a lot of that stuff. So it's just kind of neat. The two guys that were clueless, not that we were clueless, but we were young guys that didn't know what the heck was going on, ended up making contributions to this thing years later, independently of each other. It's not like we've been comparing notes over the years. We surely have not.
What a coincidence, and what a cool history story. I never in a million years, actually I've never even thought, gee, I wonder who composed the Apple theme when you turn it on. Never in a million years would have thought Stanley Jordan. That's wild.
Everything, this is a really interesting exercise, and I think this even appears in Think and Grow Rich. But whoever first thought it up, it's really worth thinking about. There is nothing that you see anywhere around you. We're not including trees and birds and flowers and stuff like that. But everything you see started out as some guy or gal with a blank piece of paper and a pencil, writing it down, figuring it out. The chair that you're sitting on, if you're sitting on a chair, the phone that you're using, the network that we're using right now to talk on. All of these things started out as an idea that were developed and perfected and sold, and the idea had to be sold, and then the company started prototyping it and then building it, and then they started marketing it, and sales channels were built up. Everything you see is the result of somebody's thinking and then hard work to bring into reality. None of this is not a thing in our social world that is not that did not originate as an idea or as a thought, and is not the result of somebody hustling like crazy to make it happen. It's just kind of interesting.
That's right. And as we speak right now, there could be some 17-year-old kid in his parents' basement with that pad and paper or his laptop, who's right now, as we speak, developing the next breakthrough idea that's going to change history. Who knows? There's still, even though I get people bitching that they don't think there's any opportunity left, there's still plenty of opportunity.
Oh, you can't say, you can't be paying attention to the world as it is right this minute and say there's no opportunity. It's just, you're just not paying attention.
That's right. One of the many things that is attributed to you, I would, if you could just help out the poor folks who need some clarity on internet marketing. You have a very easy to understand 3-step formula that is the underlying theme of all your materials. It was basically the theme of every system seminar, and it's what finally gave me clarity when I was confused by the technology. You have a 3-step formula for successful internet marketing. Would you mind sharing that for anybody listening to this who maybe has been following bad advice or has been confused by bright, shiny objects?
Well, I've got a bunch of three-step things, so I'm not sure which one you mean. Do you mean traffic plus conversion equals
That's
profit?
The one. If you wouldn't mind talking about that, please.
Not at all. Not at all. That came up when I was doing the very first system seminar. I'd already been doing internet stuff at that point for nearly, almost not quite 10 years, we'll say 8 years, and I'd seen a lot of stuff come and go, and the confusion rate at that point in time in 2002 was super high because on the one hand you had all the dot-com mania where the thesis was anything you put on the internet is going to be wildly successful, which is just crazy on its face, and yet people believed it. And then of course all those businesses collapsed and went to zero, or many of them did. And there was just massive confusion. But basically what it boiled down to in those days, this is really what was going on. And sadly, it's still going on today to a degree, which is if you want to do an internet business, give somebody else a ton of money, and they will, A, either build you the website you need, or B, give you the secrets of, success that you need, or the coaching program, or the apprenticeship program, or whatever the heck program. And that's how it's going to be accomplished. But mostly, believe it or not, back in 2002, the big problem, and it's still a big problem today, but it was a really big problem then, was web designers who knew nothing about marketing, who knew nothing about business, most of whom were, unreliable at best, or many of whom were unreliable at best. And so you'd see people spend $5, $10, $15, $25, $30,000. I just ran into a friend. I can't believe she did this. Spent $89,000 developing a web business with some technology people who. Anyway, I don't want to go off too far into that. But anyway, that's what the model was. And I said, no. The model is you got to get people to come to your page. Forget about spending thousands or tens of thousands of dollars building an elaborate website. Do you have a way to get people to come to your page? Can you even imagine how people would come to your page? Where you would find, first, where would you find the people to come to your page? How can you reach out and literally touch them? And if you don't know the answer to that, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Just stop. So that's the first issue. And then the second issue is, okay, once they show up on your page, what are you going to do to get value from their visit? It's not just enough to have a shiny, fancy, fantastic web page. Now, people are figuring that out gradually, but it's a really huge issue because just like when your phone rings as a result of running an ad in a newspaper or on a poster, they're not going to call you tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day until you get it right. You've got one chance to make some kind of connection with them. So what are you going to do? How are you going to convert them? And conversion is getting them to opt in, getting them to listen to an interview, getting them to make an initial purchase or do a trial. All the different things all the different action items that you can get, that you can measure, that lead someone one step closer to becoming a customer. So do you have a conversion strategy? And then something that I didn't include in the mix that I include now is, do you even have a reason to be in the market? Like, do you actually have something that's significantly better, faster, more affordable, a better value, whatever any better that you can imagine? Do you actually have something worthwhile to bring to the market? I was always assuming that somebody, you've got something that really deserves to be in the marketplace and actually fulfills a need in the marketplace. We'll just assume that exists. But assuming that exists, the issues are, where are the people who are you going to get to come to your site? How are you going to reach them? How are you going to get them there? And then once they're there, what are you going to do with them to move things forward? And those are the big issues. And what I found was people were spending 80 to 90 to 95% of their time on every other issue under the sun. And my advice to people was, you should be spending at least 80% of your time on traffic and conversion issues. And, all the other stuff like sharpening your pencils and emptying the waste paper basket and whatever else people do with their time, that's a whole other operational management trivial issue. But it should be traffic, conversion. And simple idea, but maybe somebody was talking about it back then. I don't know. Maybe Corey, maybe Corey Rudell was telling people that. Probably was, because certainly his stuff was excellent, but there weren't a lot of people talking about that. They were all talking about, I don't know, what was the push technology. Just all kinds of crazy stuff that doesn't even exist anymore today.
Interesting. Well, it was what finally gave me my clarity about internet marketing, and I had to slap my forehead, feel like a dummy, and think, this is exactly what I've been doing offline. I should have realized that and should have applied online. It was a big breakthrough for me, even though, yes, it is simple, but isn't that where the biggest breakthroughs come, Ken? Usually from the simplest of things?
They really do. They really do. It's like, people need stuff. People want stuff. They want to be treated right. They want to understand what the heck you're talking about. They want to get value from their purchase. This is what's going on. And yet those few things that I just mentioned are often not even on the radar screen of people starting and even operating businesses. They're focusing on everything else but those core issues. And if you focus on those core issues, you will get response. And it takes time. It takes time to build critical mass in any industry, in any business. But you have to kind of calculate that into your you have to put that in your calculations that, you can do everything right, and you just may not. There's a great example, and I forget. It comes from one of the old-time motivational speakers. I'm drawing a total blank on the guy's name, but he was like a super famous one. Anyway, he said, it's like when you're pumping water from an old-fashioned water pump. It takes a lot of pumping before the water starts coming. It's not like you turn the faucet and the water just comes. You got to pump and pump and pump, and eventually the water starts coming. And once that's happening, once you've gotten it to that critical mass, then one pump of the water, of the pump, brings a lot of water. It's like, wow, look how easy this is. But what's missing from people's consciousness is those first 10 or 15 or 20 times you're pumping and nothing's coming up. But you have to do that to get the flow to start. When people go, this was a very popular meme in the early, 2000s. Just press send, you just press send, that money just flows. Well, you know what? That's literally true after you've built up the 10, 15, 20, 50,000 person mailing list, which takes a hell of a long time. Once you've done that, yeah, it's true. You mail a good offer, good targeted offer to 50,000 people who believe in you, and the money just flows. But nobody's going to hand you that, and you're not going to build that up in a weekend or a week or a month or even a year. It's a lot of shoe leather to get to that point. Worthwhile, but you have to be psychologically prepared that you're going to do a lot of work on the front end with no immediate payoff. And that's just a hard thing for a lot of people to do, because some people, because they're just never going to get it, they're just immature and they're going to be immature till they're 90. But for a lot of people, no one's ever educated them. They may not know, they may not have family members who are in business, they may not have friends and neighbors who are in business, and they've never been exposed to real business. They're just sort of consumers who've watched a lot of TV and don't really understand how the world works. And they just don't know about the idea of months and years of front-ending effort in order to build something that's lucrative. And that's an important lesson for everybody who's serious about business to know about. And if you really got to read the bios of people, and I've tried to share some biographical material on this call. I think of Joe Sugarman. I think a great book to read is his Success Forces book, which is sort of an autobiography of all the crazy businesses he tried when he was a young guy. We all know him for Blue Blocker, and, he made $1 gazillion from that. And some people know him from his high-tech catalog business that he had. But previous to that, he had all kinds of crazy business ideas, Some of them made a little money. Some of them were absurd and went nowhere. And that's kind of the way that the animal works.
That's right. You made an observation that I hadn't thought of before, but a lot of their frame of reference is the job. Maybe they put in a week and then they get paid, or maybe it's 2 weeks. That's their only frame of reference. Maybe they have never been exposed to the concept of the well, like you were talking about. So maybe it's not just slothfulness and laziness. Maybe it's just their frame of reference. As I like to call it, I spent the 12 years in the government-sponsored youth indoctrination camp. Other people call it public school, but whatever, that's what I call it. And so the only thing I was conditioned for and programmed for was shut up, sit down, follow orders, be a good little soldier, get a job. And so that was my whole frame of reference. You go to work for a week, you get paid. All the things you're sharing on this call were actually revolutionary concepts for me when I decided to get into business. Yeah, you may be pumping at the well for a while before you get some water coming out. So you better be prepared for that.
And you sacrifice. I tell people, look, if you're starting from scratch, forget living the standard American middle class dream. You're not going to have the vacations and the boat and the new car and there's keeping up with the Joneses and watching football with your friends and all that other stuff. You don't get that, And if you're trying to keep one foot in the quote normal life and another foot in the business building life, especially when the business is getting built. Yeah, at a certain point, in fact, let me tell you about the 3 stages of business building. Don't let me forget, because that's really important orientation for people. But in the early days, years, you're not going to live that great. You're going to sacrifice a lot of stuff for the business. And one of the things you're going to sacrifice is, your friends that have the jobs or the steady jobs, or who live as if their jobs are going to last forever and therefore don't invest in anything else other than consumer items, you're not going to have all the toys. I'll tell you this, anytime you see somebody sitting on the hood of their Maserati or they used to be the Rolls Royce in the old days, or flashing their cash, or talking about even the people that talk about their trips to Disneyland with their families and all that, those people should be discounted instantly, because business has nothing to do with what you're consuming or going to consume or are consuming. It has to do with business itself. And selling people on this dream that if they just buy the course or take the apprenticeship program, they're going to be having these fabulous lifestyles is just absurd. Fabulous lifestyles can come if all goes well, but they are certainly not part of the early years. In fact, it's the opposite. It's not taking the family to Disneyland. By the way, your family will survive very well without them going to Disneyland. In fact, they'd be better off. I think you could take the whole Disney empire and flush it, and it would be an improvement for your family. So, these are realities. We're having this commemorative seminar conference in September to commemorate the life of Marty Edelstein, the founder of Boardroom. One of the great. He's a member of the Direct Marketing Hall of Fame. I mean, straight up, can't buy your way into that. You've got to be granted that, and it's not easy to get. And before he passed away, he was admitted to the Direct Marketing Hall of Fame, and by God, he earned it. And all he did was work. He loved his work, and he loved his business, and he was really good at it, and that's what he did. I'm not saying everybody's got to be that way. For example, I worked hard for as long as I needed to until I had the resources I needed to be able to say, okay, now I'm going to do what I want, which sometimes is business, but very often are things that are not financially rewarding, but they're things that I believe in. I think things that I enjoy doing and want to do. So I have a slightly different view of Marty. I could not be running the system seminar till I'm 70 or till I'm in the grave. That just didn't interest me. But for him, that did interest him. But the point is, when I was into it, when I was focusing on the system, that was it. I had a little vacation here and there. We did seminars in England, and we had some fun. It wasn't all grim, but that was pretty much it. And for Marty, that running Boardroom was pretty much it. He had a mechanical palm tree in his office, and he'd flip a switch, and the leaves would kind of rustle as if he were at the beach. And that was he joked that was his vacation. But he loved what he was doing, and that's why it was. He put his genius into it, and that's why that business was so successful. So let me talk about the 3 stages of business, just so everybody can orient themselves.
Yes.
First stage of business is what I call wandering in the wilderness. This is before you have a business idea, and a lot of people they find that state very frustrating. And I'm here to tell you that there is no avoiding that state. There's no avoiding that state of not knowing. There's no avoiding that state of wandering around the wilderness lost, not without a direction. Now, that doesn't mean you're, doing nothing. It means you're checking out one thing after another. You're reading this, you're reading that. You're talking to this guy, you're talking to that guy. You're going to this conference. Not spending a fortune, but, when you think something through very carefully and if something appears to really have value, you spend the money necessary, to make the contacts and to get to know people. And you just think and think and think. And I've seen so many people, including me, go through this process. A classic example, something we've talked about on this call already, Mark Andreessen, starting Netscape when he was 23. His partner was Jim Clark, who was one of the co-founders of Silicon Graphics. They met when Mark arrived in Silicon Valley in January of 1994 and got together. Clark had just left Silicon Graphics and was looking for his next big thing, and somebody had recommended that he talk with Mark because Mark already had 1 million users on Mosaic. Interesting enough, nobody in the industry paid any attention to Mark Andreessen at all when he arrived in Silicon Valley. Microsoft wasn't interested in him. Apple wasn't interested in him. Oracle wasn't interested in him. Hewlett-Packard wasn't interested in him. Nobody was interested in him. Even though in less than a year's time, he had gone from 0 to 1 million users of a piece of software. How deep those people had their what's up there, their heads up there, what, I don't know, but nobody saw value in him. But Jim Clark, because he was kind of on the beach and looking for a new thing to do, met with Mark. And interestingly, Clark talked to a lot of people. Clark had the money and the connections and the know-how and the drive to build a business. Everyone was too scared. Everyone wanted to keep with their job, their cool little job, and Mark didn't have that great a job, so he had nothing to lose. But anyway, the point of the story is they spent months talking back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, trying to come up with an idea before they finally said, you know what, this browser thing actually could be a business. There is a business here. Initially, they rejected that idea. They were looking at developing an interactive television, a platform for interactive TV. And after talking about it for months, they realized, you know what, that's not the opportunity. The opportunity is going back to this browser, commercializing it, making a business out of that. And that took, so that we've got a software genius, and we've got a ex-Stanford professor who already built the coolest business then in the Valley, which was Silicon Graphics, lost, wandering in the wilderness for months before they came up with a direction. So what makes you think you, who's probably not a software genius, probably not an ex-Stanford professor who built one of the coolest companies in the Silicon Valley, what makes you think you're going to figure it out in a week or a weekend or a month? It's not going to happen. You're going to be lost. You're going to be like, what do I do? What do I do? I'll look at this. I'll look at that. So that's the wandering lost in the wilderness. At some point, if you're diligent and you're really researching, you're really thinking, and you're really talking to people, and you're just using your brain on all 8 cylinders, you're going to see an opportunity that makes sense for you. And again, you can't invade Afghanistan in a pickup truck. It's an opportunity that with the resources you've got or can gather, that you can actually win at. It may not be your ultimate destination, but it's a piece of ground that you can seize and hold and use as a base to grab other pieces of territory. You're going to see that. You're going to figure it out. The lights are going to go on. And now it's a matter of figuring out, okay, how am I going to, and you're also going to see how you're going to enter the marketplace with what. And that's always the question. It's not about marketing. It's about with what thing am I going to enter what marketplace and how am I going to do it?
Exactly.
It's a very specific formula. It's not, I'm going to go into marketing. I'm going to go into internet marketing. Yeah. No. You're going to bring a particular thing to a particular market in a particular way. That's where your success is going to come from. It will come from no other source. So you get that flash. And, it may not be 100% formed, but you get enough of a feeling that you see what to do. And that's what I call you're running around with your hair on fire. And this is when you're working 12, 18 hours a day, 6, 7 days, 8 days a week if you can find an extra day in the week. You're not eating, you're not bathing, you're not socializing. You are just nose deep to the grindstone and doing more work than is healthy or sane. And you are working to get to critical mass. You're working to get that water flowing from that pump so that maybe you can hire somebody to do some of the hireable tasks, or to hire an expert, or to hire an expert to advise you, or to whatever you have to do to get to the next stage. And what's critical mass? Critical mass is where the business is actually making money. It's paying your rent. It's paying your grocery bills. It's growing. It's paying the expense of growing the business, and suddenly you've got something that's making money, and has hopefully an open field to make more money and grow bigger. At which point you're now trying to remove yourself from the business, not in the sense of stepping away from the business, but in the sense of you're no longer going to be the guy that answers the phone 12 hours a day. You're no longer going to be the guy who goes to the post office and delivers the big, bin of mail. You're no longer going to be the person that sits up all night, with the spreadsheet and Quicken and calculating all the profit loss stuff. You're finding people to do the things that others can do. And what others can never do is have vision and drive and resilience and imagination. That you cannot hire out. That's what you got to bring to the party. But you'll soon find that there's a lot of pieces of your business that you not only don't have to do, you should not do. Somebody else should be doing it. And so those are the 3 stages: lost in the wilderness, until you find that point of entry, and then working like a crazy man, with like that frog in the milk, churning like crazy, not exactly knowing what you're doing, but doing a lot of it over a long period of time, and then getting some solidity to the point where, okay, now you can bring in people when we ran the system, I'm not really the best business guy that ever lived, to put it mildly. But when we ran that business, I was probably doing the work based on what I see other companies doing that did similar numbers to us. I was probably doing the work of 5 people, and Bettina was probably doing the work of 5 people. So we saw a lot of companies that were doing numbers similar to us that had 10 employees, Now, if I had been really smart, I would have figured out how to bring in more people to take over some of the tasks, but didn't necessarily work. We never got to that stage of evolution, but we did get to the point where the business was incredibly lucrative. And it took just a lot of scrambling, a lot of, more work than was reasonable. That's sort of the bottom line there. But those are your 3 stages of if you get to the full maturity of a business, which you can, here's a nice thing too. You don't have to do everything right to do very well. But one thing you do have to do is bring a good product to a real market and be able to get that market to see what you're doing and come to you and give you money for it.
Ken, I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of marketers. I've done a lot of interviews, but you've been revealing a lot of gold nuggets today. But what you just went through, the 3 phases of a business, if I could be crowned king for a day, I would make that required study before anybody could graduate from high school, because you have just enunciated something that is not a popular thing to enunciate because it doesn't sell 4-figure, 5-figure, bright, shiny objects. But it's the truth of what it really takes to be successful in business. So, I appreciate you. Not too many people have the balls to share that. I appreciate you sharing that.
My job was, and to the extent that I still do it, is to bring people as clear and useful advice as I can. So I've given a lot of thought to these issues, and and working with students, and I think, why is this person so frustrated? Why are they giving up or thinking of giving up? And and you realize, well, they don't realize what phase of business they're in. They are lost in the wilderness. It's okay. It's one of the phases you go through. Or, they are working 18 hours a day. It's okay. Guess what? That's what it takes in the early days. Everybody likes to say, you don't have to build your own website. You don't have to know how to do anything. You just have to know how to turn your computer on. Everything can be hired out and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, good theory. Good theory. The more you know how to do for yourself in the beginning, the better. Not everybody's so lucky to have reliable vendors that come sort of. There's a whole generation of internet marketers who benefit from the fact from having access to reliable vendors from the early days, and it's not necessarily something that everybody's going to have, if you follow me. So the more you know how to do it, the more you can do for yourself, the better. Especially these days, the more tech stuff that you can do. I'm not terribly technical myself. I was kind of blessed in that Bettina was really facile with all that stuff. But, that's sort of another thing is, my God, if you're going to go in the internet business, you either better be technical, you either better be technical, or you better know somebody who you can rely on who's technical. There's no way you're going to be in this business without quite a bit of technical expertise.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
If people want to, I'm looking at two of your sites now, but if somebody wants to find out more about you or wants to get involved, are you doing any teaching anymore or coaching or anything like that?
Best thing that I recommend people do is get the System Club letters, which you can easily get from kenmccarthy.com, Ken, MCCARTHY.com, and or join the System Club. And the System Club is basically, it started out as graduates of the System Seminar, but since I don't do the System Seminar anymore, there's no way for people to join the club through the old way. So now we've pretty much opened the door to anybody who's serious. And we have a trial period where you can check it out and see if it's something for you, and then just stick with it. And we've got 3 programs every month. We have something called Tech Talk, which is a tool review program, audio program. I can't believe nobody's doing this but us, but as is often the case, we're the only people doing it. Usually when people hear about a tool on the internet, it's some hyped up thing and, it's $2,000 a month or, it comes bundled with a coaching program or some other crap. And usually it's a tool that's not worth a damn and is overpriced, when in reality, the internet is chock full of amazing tools, marketing and otherwise, some of which are free, many of which are very low cost. And so every month we review, what's good, what's not good, what's worth checking out. So that's Tech Talk. There's no other place I know where you can get that. The other thing we do is our masterclass series where I talk with somebody who's accomplished in business. It may not be internet marketing, maybe any one of a number of businesses, but they're smart and they have a lot of useful things to share. And then the third thing that we do every month is Second Saturday, which is usually held second Saturday, not often, not always, but usually. And that's where I will take somebody's business or I'll review consulting I've done with other businesses and say, okay, here's how you apply, we've been talking about all these ideas and all these tools and all these things. Here's how we would apply these ideas to this particular business right now. And that's possibly one of my strongest knacks is if somebody's got something valuable and worthwhile, I'm really good at helping them position it and get it and insert it into a real living marketplace. Without false modesty, I'd put myself up there with anybody on the planet when it comes to that skill. And I can do it without saying, hey, you need to give me $20,000 to be my apprentice. And I can also do it without somebody having to spend a fortune to do it. It usually boils down to digital shoe leather. And I just see these things. I just see exactly what somebody needs to do to package themselves and what somebody needs to do to build their network so that their business will get traction as quickly as possible with as little money up front as possible. And that could be the most valuable part of being a System Club member. So yeah, System Club book, System Club letters, which you talked about earlier, and/or the System Club itself. And we've got people should read the letter to the System Club. I think it's systemclub.com or the systemclub.com. And
yeah, I'm looking at it now. It's with the word the, THE, thesystemclub.com. Of course, I can get to it. They can get to all that from KenMcCarthy.com, KenMcCarthy.com.
And I still like to work with people. I just, the annual seminar was a big production, and I don't need to do it anymore, and I don't want to do it anymore. But I still, even on this trip, I'm so theoretically on vacation, and twice now I've sat down and given somebody. Some random lucky person who I've encountered somewhere or another, they say, hey, I got this business idea. What would you do? And, I just open the floodgates, and they're like, oh, my God, I never thought of this, never thought of that. I said, I know. That's what I do. So I still like doing that a lot. I just don't like putting the big event on because we've done it. It's done. Everything that you need to know about internet marketing is already out there. It's like enough is enough already. Let's talk about specific businesses, instead of generalities. Pretty much. We know what works on the internet. We don't need to keep rehashing that anymore.
Exactly. Your second Saturday thing, when you mentioned that, I thought, man, I hope your people understand the value of it. I had a musical analogy spring to mind. I thought, can you imagine getting a jazz trumpet lesson from Miles Davis? That's what your second Saturday to me sounds like. What a enormous value.
I have to agree with you.
Well,
it's good.
Again, everybody should. I'm looking at I'm looking at your site. There's another site, Ken's catalog. I've got everything on there. I've got System Secrets. I've got System Smart Beginners. Like I said, I got the System Club letters. I've got your Advanced Copywriting and Info Marketing course, which we don't even want to get started on. I could talk about that for probably the next 8 hours. There's stuff on there. Ken, you know this. I apprenticed directly with Gary Halbert. I mean, the dude lived with me in Costa Rica, and we hung together way too much time for almost 2 years. There's stuff in your copywriting course that Gary didn't even share with me. There were some major breakthroughs I got from that course. And it's not an exaggeration to say I've bought every copywriting book that I can find since I got into this stuff. I've bought every course I can find. I've gone to every seminar I could find. But your copywriting course, wow, some major epiphanies.
Yeah, well, I love the science of copywriting, and I'm quite a student of it. And Gary, of course, was one of the great geniuses. I think pound for pound, nobody ever explained copywriting better than Gary Halbert. He was just a genius at teaching it. And so you had a good mentor, to say the least. Challenging mentor, I'm sure. I'm sure he challenged. I always say to people, Gary Halbert's a force of nature. He's like the wind. He can rip trees up by their roots, or he can make the windmill turn and grind grain. I mean, he's a force of nature. As long as you understand that about Gary, everything will be fine. He's not your average guy, but what a genius as a copywriter. And by the way, let me say this about go and read Gary Halbert's copy. It's not slick. It's not full of bombastic claims. It's as smooth and natural as silk. It's amazing writing, and you could hardly do better than really study Gary's stuff.
That's right. Ken, you've been really generous with your time today. I really appreciate you sharing everything that you shared. I've learned a lot. I could have sworn I almost heard this huge collective sigh from hundreds of thousands of people when you were talking about the 3 phases of business, when you were talking about the Lost in the Woods phase. Mm-hmm. I swear I heard this collective sigh of people saying, thank God. Oh, it's good to know. I thought I was just, this was unusual, and I was going through something that, nobody else has gone through, but that was great information.
Great. Well, glad to help. I love this stuff, and I love people that are working hard to, bring something of value to people, which is really what business is about. If you're looking for a success formula, people need stuff, people want stuff, and they love doing business with good companies and getting good products and being treated right. And, anybody that wants to do that is somebody that I admire. And I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Well, thanks, Ken. That's a great way to wrap up this call. Again, really appreciate your time. You did this even while you were traveling and on vacation, so I'm sending out much gratitude, so I really appreciate it.
Great. Well, thanks for giving me a chance to yak.
Pleasure was all mine.
Okay.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll talk soon.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Hope you enjoyed today's show. K9 Crew got a special treat for you, what we are affectionately referring to as the Off the Chain Hotline. Tell us you love us. Tell us you hate us. Ask questions. We don't care. Just call 321-424-6043 and give us a piece of your mind.
This is the podcastfactory.com.